projects while working as an artist. He's the long-running illustrator for the best-selling Warriors graphic novel series and exhibited at the Museum of Comic and Cartooning Art. As an editorial cartoonist, James spent 2 years as staff illustrator for the popular New York City Nightlife Guide, Next Magazine, contributed dozens of celebrity caricatures to Entertainment Weekly, and continues to create art for publication in the community. He is currently working on a new graphic novel for young adults. Without further ado, please give a warm welcome to James L. Berry.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. I really appreciate the invite. As Christina said, my name is James Berry. I'm an illustrator for books, editorial cartoons, and storyboards, but my best known work is for the Warriors graphic novel series by Aaron Hunter. If you don't know, Warriors is a series of chapter books for young readers about clans of feral cats that live in the woods. It just celebrated its 20th anniversary since publication, first publication. I was originally hired about 15 years ago to illustrate the first black and white manga-style comic to tell a new story about Graystripe, the deputy of ThunderClan, who is catnapped and taken to live in the suburbs. There he meets Millie, a kitty pet, who decides to leave her home and help Graystripe find his clan. The next trilogy I illustrated is about Ravenpaw, a former ThunderClan cat, who has decided instead to live a quiet life on a farm with his friend Barley. But when devious rogue cats invade the barn, Ravenpaw must turn to his clan for help and determine if he really has the heart of a warrior. That's what these 3 books are about. Then we have the third black and white trilogy, the story of Leafstar, the leader of Sky Clan, and the first cat in that role to also be the mother to kids. When a mysterious stranger appears and tries to join their clan, Leafstar must find out if she really has what it takes to juggle motherhood with her responsibilities to Sky Clan. After these were all published as 90-page black and white comics, which incidentally they have here at the library, the black and white comics, HarperCollins asked me to go back and color them all, which was really exciting for me to do. And they were reprinted as full-color graphic novels. From there, Harper asked me if I'd be interested in creating some straight-to-color new graphic novels. The first of these color books was released in 2020, and it follows Feathertail. That's this first one right here. She's the daughter of cats from 2 rival clans. After some shocking betrayals by her leader, Leopardstar, Feathertail must learn to trust again and move beyond the shadows in RiverClan. Winds of Change is the story of Mudclaw, deputy of WindClan, who decides he will do whatever it takes to better his clanmates in their new home, even if that means staging a coup against his leader. Then we have Exile from ShadowClan. This story is about Nightpelt, an asthmatic cat who is banished from ShadowClan by the harsh leader Broken Star. Along with him are the elders, deemed too old to be of service to the clan. Nightpelt tries his best to provide for the other exiles at a new camp. And when Broken Star's cruelty becomes too much, Nightpelt seeks new alliances to oust him. And finally, the last book I illustrated came out last summer, and it follows the story of fan favorite Brightheart, a warrior that was mauled by dogs as a kid. After overcoming her disfigurement, Brightheart has found a mate who loves her and is pregnant with kids of her own. But when food begins disappearing from camp, Brightheart takes it upon herself to unmask the thief in ThunderClan. So those are the 7 books that I illustrated for the Warriors series. I also have done a lot of mini comics that appear in the back of some of the Super Edition chapter books. As I mentioned, I started working on the series about 15 years ago. Each book takes about 1.5 years overall to create, with the writers coming up with their ideas and to me illustrating it. The first thing you have to do when you start a graphic novel as the illustrator is to come up with character designs. So what I'm sharing with you here are some of the original character designs I did for Gray Stripe. Like I said, I started this a long time ago, so my drawing style has evolved and hopefully improved like any artist out there. The more you do it, the better you get. But this was the original sketches I did for Gray Stripe back in 2007-ish. Eventually, he kind of came up with a kind of a slightly cuter character design, bigger eyes. But the thing about Gray Stripe that I think really makes him unique is the spiky tufts of hair and his bushy eyebrows that hopefully show a lot of expression. As I continued with the series, I had to come up with more character designs. And again, my drawing skills, my understanding of anatomy improved. I got a cat of my own to serve as a model, so that helps a lot. So these are the character designs I did of Ravenpaw. And then, back in 2019, when I was hired to do the new graphic novels, the new four, this was the character design I did for Feathertail. I don't know if you can tell, but she's the daughter, she's the daughter of Gray Stripe right here. So, to kind of maintain that family resemblance, I worked on that a lot. Actually, there's a lot of characters in the Warriors that are related to each other. So whenever I would draw one character that was related to another, I would try to take elements of that cat and impose them on the new character. So that's how I come up with character designs. Now, when it comes to actually creating a comic, I would think that some of you might be artists yourself, interested in creating your own graphic novels or comic books, either for your friends or maybe eventually to be published. So I'm going to show you some behind-the-scenes steps that I take to create the art for the Warrior series and other comics in the future. So what we have here is a comic book script. If you don't know, Aaron Hunter is actually a pen name for a team of writers. Originally, Kate Carey, Cherith Baldry, and Tui Sutherland. Kate and Cherith live in England. Tui is an American. And they created the series along with some other writers. And they come up with all the storylines as a team and then take turns writing the books. That's why they can come up with so many so quickly. For the comics, the Aarons would provide an outline. And a writer named Dan Jolly, he's a prolific writer of comics and novels published under his own name. But Dan would write the script. So this is what a comic book script kind of more or less looks like. Basically, we have, a description of what the panel looks like with the dialogue. As the artist, it was up to me to reinterpret what Dan and the Aarons had written. And I could add panels or take panels away or change angles if I needed. But ultimately, it was a lot of help to work with a writer like Dan, who would give me really nice descriptions of what was happening. So, if you're an artist or a writer, and you're having trouble, doing it all on your own, I would suggest finding a collaborator that you can work with. A lot of graphic novels are published by teams, a writer and an artist that might work together. Obviously there are some, really great artists like Raina Tagelmeyer who does it all herself. But even she has a colorist that might help her. But if you're struggling, it's always good to collaborate with someone. So that's something I would encourage you to look forward to, collaborators that you can work with. But so anyway, from there we had the script, and it's up to me to start interpreting that as a piece of artwork. So the first thing I do is a rough sketch, and just a tiny little sketchbook that I, just 7 inches tall, nothing big. But I will, when I would be in the process of creating a new graphic novel, my goal was to sketch out like 5 to 6 pages a day to keep on my 6 to 7 month schedule, right? So I would do these kind of drawings at night. I would look at the script, read the description, see how much dialogue there was on each page, and kind of do a rough estimate of what I wanted it to look like. So I would usually do those in the evening, sometimes even while I was watching TV or waiting for dinner, whatever. And then the next day, I would sketch out a series of rough sketches like this. And I would put the dialogue in. So like I said, I would try to do about 5 or 6 a day. And sometimes I would sketch these on pencil and then take photographs or scan them into a computer and play around with the size of the panel, making sure that there was enough room for the dialogue. Eventually, I ended up doing all my sketching digitally, and then I would print it out, but I'll tell you more about that later. Yeah, so this is an example of a rough sketch for a comic book page. And I would do the entire book like this, so all 200 to 300 pages in a rough form like this, like drawing 5 or 6 a day. So once that was done, I would send it to my publisher, to my editor at HarperCollins for feedback. That's another great thing that artists need is feedback. So whether you're showing your work to an editor that's paying you, or to your mom or a friend, anyone that can look at your work at a stage like this and understand what's happening can be helpful. Because sometimes I would draw something and my editor would come back to me and say, oh, I don't really understand what's happening in this panel, or that expression doesn't really make sense. Could you revise that? And it's always good to get feedback at this stage before you spend a lot of time inking and coloring your work. So that brings me to the next stage, the inking stage. So once I sketched out the entire book like that, I would start inking with traditional dip pens and black ink, right? And I have some pages, some original pages here. This is how I illustrate all 7 of the graphic novels. Like I said, originally I would sketch it out on pencil, and then I'd use a light box to transfer the pencil sketches onto this paper. Over time, I found it was faster if I could sketch digitally, and I would print out the digital sketches in blue ink. So this is a trick artists have used for a long time, sketching with a blue pencil and then inking on top of it, because when you scan artwork that has been drawn with a blue pencil and then inked with black lines, when you scan it, there's a setting where you can eliminate the blue sketch art, the blue lines, right? So I don't know if you can see it. I'll have this on the table later and you can look closer. But you can see the blue sketch lines underneath, but eventually when I scanned it, they would disappear, right? So traditional pen and ink. A lot of people also use microns, which are another great tool for artists. They're just pens that have ink in them. So I would sketch everything out and then ink the entire book. And that would take about 2 months for a 200-page book, right? So again, my goal was like 5 to 6 pages a day. If I got behind, I would sometimes have to work on weekends, but ultimately that was my schedule. Does anyone have any questions about what I've shared so far, about the process for coming up with a page?
So you're saying you still do it by hand, the inking part?
Yes, Yeah, I like comics to kind of have that hand-drawn feel. The other great thing is that there's a lot of fans that like to collect the artwork, so I'm able to, share that online. I can sell it on Etsy, and it's nice to kind of have a physical thing, I think, that kind of maybe hopefully sets it apart from something that's all digitally drawn. Yeah, you have a question?
Are you working on one right now, big book?
I'm all done on the Warriors series for now. I'm working on an original graphic novel right now for older readers. All right, so after that, it comes to the either toning or color stage. So as I mentioned, the original 3 graphic novels were published in black and white. So this is how I would tone them in black and white. And that was pretty easy. I would just kind of add I had different shades of gray that I would use to add a little bit of tone to the page. But the real fun came when I was asked to color the artwork. And I really think that color added a lot to the series because I was able to evoke mood and emotion with the backgrounds and the color themes throughout the scene. And also, I think color helps distinguish characters from each other. I put a lot of effort in making each character's like facial structure and eyes and stuff unique. But in black and white, sometimes cats would get, mistaken one for the other. So I think adding color really helped a lot with this series, and I appreciate HarperCollins asking me to go back and color them. And so then obviously we add the word balloons on top of this, and that's another stage. I showed you earlier how I would lay them out, and I use a program called InDesign to lay out the word balloons for publication. But any typos you see in the books are not my fault. There are some, and so that would be the editor's job to look for typos and things like that. So anyway, I will take responsibility for that. So some other things about making comics are your goals as an artist, right? What are you trying to tell the audience with your work, right? So what I'm going to share with you now are some examples from different panels and books of things that I always try to incorporate in my comic book art. The first is establishing a sense of place, right? So for each scene in a comic book, I like to open up with a wide establishing shot. This is kind of like when you see a movie and they open up a scene with a shot of a farm or a shot of the desert, whatever. I would try to do the same thing with the comic book. So on the first page of each scene, generally near the top, near the beginning, I would draw a wide establishing shot that shows the location clearly, so the audience, the reader, knows where this action is happening. And then oftentimes, as the scene progresses, you might pull out again for another wide shot to remind the audience where they are and what's happening. In this case, Ravenpaw's home is on fire. So, there was a scene that built up to this moment. The barn catches on fire, and eventually we pull out to another wide shot that shows what's happening. The next thing I like to incorporate in my comics are details that are important to the characters. In this case, the Warrior series is all about cats, so I would really try to pay attention to things that are low to the ground and that a cat might be interested in. In this case, we have Millie, looking at her comfortable food dispenser, right? So that's something that's important to her, and she's deciding to leave her home and become a warrior cat, right? But then also within the world of the warriors, things like bugs and mice and plants, those are all things that I would really try to incorporate into my work. And then in the case of this bottom left panel, when Ravenpaw and Barley run into the home of the farmers, the things that seem normal to us, like a TV and a couch, might seem really huge and overwhelming to a cat that's never been inside of a house. So I tried to play up the really wild patterns and colors and the static on the TV, that kind of thing. Subjective motion is another trick I like to use in my artwork. The idea with subjective motion is you're making the reader feel like they're moving with the character and that the background behind the character is blurred. This is a technique that a lot of artists have adopted from traditional Japanese manga style comics. And so that's something that I was definitely keen on including in my original work and continued throughout. Emotionally expressive effects. So you don't have to show emotion only through a character's face, although that is important. You can also use line, color, and in the case of the bottom panel, emanata. So emanata is when you see something come out of a character's head that's not really there and it emanates. That word was coined by the artist that did Beetle Bailey back in the day. I don't know if you remember Beetle Bailey comics. Mort Rucker, I think was his name. Anyway, so whenever you see a character with little, hearts in their eyes, or, a light bulb going off over their head, or in this case, hit and stars appearing, that's emanata. So, these are things I try to include not just the character's expressions, but also the background and environment around them. Does anyone have any questions about what we've talked about so far? Okay. So moving on with comic design. Some other things we like to include in comic books are the different types of panels that you use to tell your story. So after we have our big establishing shots where we see the environment, it's nice to show the character's full body so we know, exactly what's happening with the characters, where they are with relation to each other, as well as a little bit of the background. So these are examples of full panel comics. Then we have medium shots, where we usually see a character from the waist up. These are the terms that are also used in film and TV. If any of y'all are interested in that, there's a lot of overlap between comic art and creating, something you see online or on television. So medium shots, close-ups, usually from the neck up, or extreme close-ups, where you really focus in on a character's eye or a hand or a foot. So that would be an example of an extreme close-up. Showing cause and effect is a fun technique I like to use in comics. So we have one panel where a character is about to do something, and then the next panel we see the outcome of that action, right? Or in this case, on the bottom, we have Leaf Star teaching Soul how to fight like a warrior. She swipes and then ducks when he tries to retaliate, right? So that's cause and effect. So this is something cool that you might try to incorporate in your own work if you're creating comics. So, I also like to use this technique of 3 consecutive panels. So you can use this for a lot of different things. You can show a character moving through space in 3 different panels. So as you can see in this first example, we have the background staying the same, but the character, Billy Paul, Leaf Star's mate, is moving through the space. So we can see him in different areas of the background. Or we can use it to show a quick sequence of events. In the next example, we have Feathertail hunting for fish. So we see her do a splish splash thwunk. She thrusts her paw into the river, grabs a fish, and then readies it to eat, right? Or we can use 3 panels to zoom in on something dramatically. So, if you have a character that's discovering a treasure chest, maybe you could start with a wide shot of them standing from the treasure, and then we zoom in on the magic jewel or the crown that's inside that chest. In this example, we have Ravenpaw's eye zooming in and changing as the light adjusts. A few more examples, subjective motion as well as the 3-panel effects. In this example, some other fun things to include in your work are motion lines. So that's when you see a character moving quickly through a space. So instead of the background moving behind them, you use motion lines to show like a paw or a hand moving quickly. We can also break out of the panel. So that's a really cool effect that you can use for dramatic moments to really emphasize to your reader that this is something important or something exciting is happening. And sound effects, those are other great things to include in your work. You can either draw these by hand or use a program to type out the sound effect. And then again, at the bottom, we have that subjective motion speed lines as the character is moving through space. Any questions about this?
Okay. Yes.
So what I have here are some pages from A Shadow in River Clan, the story about Feathertail. I was wondering if anyone can,
Let's see. Do I start?
where did I start? There we go. So I was wondering if we could go through these pages and anyone point out some of the things I've just talked about as you might see them on this sample from a comic book page. Do you see any of the tips that I just gave you? Yeah?
Zooming equals to.
Yes, exactly. An extreme close-up of that eye. So at that moment, Feathertail is hearing someone off panel say something, and so her eye gets really big as she, who is that, right? Any other examples on this page? Do we see a full shot? Do you remember what a full shot is?
Their entire body.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. All right, so we have these two characters talking, they're old friends, being reunited, and then as you pointed out, we have an extreme close-up of Feathertail's eye as she hears someone approach. And who is it? Heavy Step, the bully from River Clan. And do you see any examples of the things we've talked about on this page? Anyone else? Yeah, like there?
Show it motion when you start.
Exactly, yep. That's subjective motion, right? Good example, or good eye. All right, so at this moment, Feathertail is defending her friend who's being bullied by Heavy Step. So she leaps to action, leave her alone. And what do we get on this page? Do you see any examples here?
The sound and the person.
Yeah, exactly. We've got some sound effects. Anything else on this page?
When she hits her then down, the impact kind of goes out.
Yeah, the expressive effect, exactly.
Is that M and I where he says, "I don't believe what I'm seeing," the lines coming out?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yep. He's getting angry there, and it's happening, right? The lines are used to show how he's feeling, right? Anyone else? Yeah.
Motion lines on her tail in the second panel.
Yes, good one. I see a couple other things up at the top. We have an example of breaking the panel, right? So we see her tail coming out on the top of the panel. And then down on the second page, can you tell what's happening there? There's the tree, right? Do you remember what that was called? For a new scene?
Establishing.
Yes, exactly, right? So the little dots remind us, okay, we're taking a little pause in the action. We're starting a new scene. So this is where Feathertail starts to get chewed out by her leader, Leopard Star, for fighting, right? So we have an establishing shot, a new scene, and and this is different. And that is, so that begins a new scene where Feathertail and Leopard Star are, having a conversation. Yeah.
You always do the 2 pages at a time, as they would be able.
Yes, exactly. That's a really good question. I do, and I use my sketchbook that's got a page on each side, so I can look at it as a book. And that's something I didn't mention, but I appreciate you asking. Is that one thing as a comic book artist is you want to think about how the panels relate to each other on the page. So I try not to have too many panels that look the same next to each other. So if on page left I've got a big panel in the middle, on page right I don't want another big panel, I want 2 smaller ones, right? So yeah, you always want to lay out your pages next to each other so you can see how it all matches, how it all works out.
The script writer, they keep that in, not have an exciting thing on the first part of the page.
Well, so not so much. I think the scriptwriter is more thinking about the 2 pages overall. Sometimes you want to leave the end of a page on a cliffhanger, or you don't want to put too much dialogue on 2 pages, right? But so he didn't really describe the shape of the panel as much as what's happening in them. It's up to the artist to think about the shape of the panel. Any other questions? Yeah, no more.
So from the whole inception to the finish, how long does this take? There's so much work involved.
Yeah, so to illustrate each of the 200-page books that we have here, it took about 7 months. Originally my schedule was 6 months, but I always ended up going over by about a month. So I would take about 2 months to sketch everything out in that rough stage that I showed you earlier. Make sure all the word balloons fit. I would show that to the editor. Then I would have about 2 months to ink everything, and then about 2 months to color it. But I'd always end up, needing about another month to, but that's, part of the deal. I think they kind of expect of that. There's a little bit of flexibility.
Right.
Yeah, the main thing is you just got to stay on schedule. Like I said, I would have okay, I've got to get 5 pages done each day. If I don't, then that means I've got to work, half day on Saturday. I got to stay.
Yes. What's your favorite part of the process?
I would say the sketching phase where I'm just determining the action, because that's just a lot of fun. It's really creative. The fun thing about inking is it's kind of meditative because at that point the drawing is more or less done, so you really just got to focus on the line work. So that's when I would listen to like a book on tape or a lot of podcasts and stuff like that. So that's fun in a different way, you know. And then coloring is a lot of fun because that's where it really starts to come to life. And it's creative in a different way, and then I'm playing with color and light and that sort of thing. So each stage is fun in a different way, you know. Yeah.
As an illustrator of a graphic novel, which is very visually intense, do you have maybe more say or more so than even the author that wrote the story? I mean, you're able to change things and say, well, this would be better if the character said this, or I need more of this on this page. You have a lot of opportunity to change that. So how does that, is it 50-50? Is it a little bit more, you get a little more say because you're visualizing it? How does that work?
Well, as far as the story and the dialogue goes, I really couldn't change any of that. There are a few scenes where I noticed, like, there was one book where a character came up and then just disappeared and they never talked about him again. And I was like, what happened to that character? Can we add just a little bit of dialogue that reminds us, oh, this character is okay, you know? And then there was another book where I suggested to the editor, I was like, could we have a little action here? It feels a little slow. And that, I don't know if you've read Winds of Change yet, but there's a scene where just a dog attacks, right? And I was like, it's kind of, not much is happening for all these pages. Can we add a little action scene? And so we added a moment where there's a dog that appears and attacks the cats while they're hunting. So there was a little bit of flexibility, but as for the dialogue, I pretty much had to keep it as they wrote it. It was more about the layout and, the way the action is drawn on the page. But like I said, it's nice to have a collaborator, because if I had all the responsibility, I think it might be a lot harder, Any other questions about Warriors? Making comics? Yeah.
Forgive me if you said this earlier, but I was looking at I've been creating Warriors since I was like this old. So I was looking at some like old works from the bundles. I noticed some other artists that Johnson. Was that like a collaboration, or was it like things that at first that you came with?
Well, so I was the first artist hired to do Gray Stripes Adventure, and then blanking on her name. Another artist illustrated The Rise of Scourge, which was Bettina Krakowski, which was a one-off manga, and it was just reprinted in color. And then, while I was working on the second trilogy, another trilogy came out about Sasha and Tiger Star, which I'm blanking on that artist's name. And so he illustrated 3 black and white manga, but I don't think there's color things now.
Was it Dogwoods?
That sounds right, yeah.
As I saw in Netflix.
Okay, yeah.
I have like a bunch of these.
Nice. Yeah, so just like, like any Marvel comic, there are going to be different artists that work on the series. If any of you are interested, there's a new art team that's actually coming on to the series, and they are actually retelling the original novels in graphic novel form. So if you haven't read all the books, I think this summer a new art team is coming in, and they've already illustrated it. And so there's going to be graphic novel versions of the first Prophecy Begins chapter book series.
Well, it's you then.
Yep.
Watched it for long. Have you been able to make a decent bidding of only doing this, or did you do other work?
That's a really good question, which actually leads me to my next thing. So yeah, I mean, I feel very lucky to have been asked to work on this series, and it's been a long-running gig, which is a dream come true for any artist. In my work, I was paid per book, so I'm not an artist that gets royalties on my work because I'm not the creator. The Aaron Hunter team, they retain all the rights. Which is, pretty normal for comic books, like I said, Marvel, DC, that kind of thing. So as an artist, I've also done a lot of work as a storyboard artist, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. So if any of you all are interested in being artists and in being an illustrator, there are lots of different avenues you can take. You don't have to just work on comics. And even now with all this, like AI and computer generated stuff, I still believe that it takes an artist's brain and skill to come up with ideas and to work collaboratively with a team that's trying to create something. So if you don't know, a lot of times the commercials you see on TV will be sketched out by a storyboard artist in advance to test it and make sure, again, that it makes sense and that whatever it is that the advertising agency is trying to sell through this commercial is clear. They also do this process for movies that you see, even the big, Marvel movies. There's a whole bunch of artists that draw by hand that sketch out all the costumes and action in advance to help create those movies that are, ultimately computer generated, but they were conceived by artists who did a lot of drawing by hand, right? So this is an example of some storyboards that I've done. This, if you don't know, Pirate's Booty, it's some kind of, snack for kids. So this is an example of some color storyboards that I did where some kids jump into the mom's minivan, she pulls out the Pirate's Booty. I'm sure there was some witty dialogue. I don't remember the dialogue. But the kids are happy, mom's, save the day, and we end with the Pirate's Booty, pack shot, right? So this is an example of some color storyboards that I did. On this next page, I've got a side-by-side of my sketches for a commercial that was created for Target. So the fun thing about being a storyboard artist is sometimes you'll do work in color that is shown to a bunch of different people and tested and see if it works. Sometimes, they will create an animatic, and it's basically like a moving version of the commercial, but done illustrated, right? So I'm going to play this real quick, and you can see what an animatic looks like next to. So as you can see there, my sketches help the director frame the shot. And so, we figure out a lot of stuff in advance when it's really easy to make changes, right? Because I probably did, 20 other drawings that were rejected, and ultimately they chose these to help make the commercial. And also, these are all done digitally. I don't draw this kind of stuff by hand because it has to be done so quickly. I do it all on an iPad or a computer. But does anyone have any questions about advertising, storyboard art?
That's what it. What program do you use to?
Mostly I use Photoshop.
That's what I got.
That was my question.
Yeah, Photoshop is a great program. You can pay a subscription and use it. And depending on how much you pay, you get more and more programs. But then also on an iPad, Procreate is a really amazing program. And I think you just pay like a one-time fee of $10. And you can like animate and draw and do all kinds of stuff with it, which, I'll show you some examples in a minute. Any other questions about?
And as a business, you need to diversify, but do you have a favorite form? Like, do you prefer doing this or writing books or doing something for a newspaper? What's your favorite version of an object art?
Yeah, well, I would have to say definitely the storytelling through graphic novels is my passion as an artist. And that's what's great about getting this kind of work is it pays better than books pay, right, publishing. So I'm able to do this, and these kind of jobs come in randomly. Like I never know when, an agency's going to call and say, we need storyboard artists next week. Are you available? So as an artist, as a freelancer, this is something you can all kind of try to do if you're interested in, is to have a long-term passion project that may or may not pay that well, and then a series of shorter jobs that you can do, like advertising or even cartoons for a newspaper or the web comics or whatever that you can do to help sustain yourself while you're doing these long-term projects. Yeah.
So do you have a manager, or how do you get your stuff out there to target to call you and say,
Honestly, it's just been word of mouth. I lived in New York for a long time, and I made connections in advertising there. I started out doing, really low budget, small stuff, but from there, you meet someone that likes your work, and they refer you to someone else, and they refer you to someone else. There are agencies and managers that handle storyboard artists. So most of those are in New York and Los Angeles, but now with things being remote, it's a lot easier to live different places. I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee now, and I'm still able to kind of maintain my work doing this kind of stuff, as well as the comics. Yeah.
To piggyback off that question, is that common to not have an agent, or is that kind of an anomaly? You've made so many friends now, you don't need one, but most people might need one.
I don't really know if one's more important than the other. I know that like storyboard artists in LA, there's a union that helps you get work. You have to actually live in California to be part of that union. And then also if you have an agent, they take a cut. So it's nice to not have to rely on an agent. I do have an agent that's helping me is going to represent me on my next graphic novel project. So and in that case, I think it will be important because they're going to help negotiate the best deal. And also, like, sometimes it does get tiring talking about money and trying to figure all that stuff out. So an agent is really helpful in that case. So I am excited to be represented as far as graphic novels go. But for the time being, I'm able to, get enough freelance work that I don't need one for storyboard art. And then finally, I do a lot of commissions. Now that I'm more or less done with the Warriors, I've been taking on more commissions, drawing pets and original characters. So at the top, we have some real pets, some real kitty pets that I've drawn. I don't know if you noticed, the first one has 6 toes. So those are a lot of fun. It's always fun to see people's pets and help, sometimes people will write me and say, oh, my cat's passed away. I would love a memorial for them. And so that's always an honor to draw. But also, of course, I love drawing cats and dogs that are still around. Another fun thing are warrior OCs. I don't know if any of you all out there have warrior OCs of your own. Those are original characters. So I didn't even realize this was happening because I was just, focused on my job, illustrating the books. But now that I'm kind of removed from it, I'm discovering there's like a whole world of fandom out there where young artists and writers are creating their own comic books about their original characters. They're even creating animation, which is so amazing. There's so much amazing Warriors animation on YouTube. I am so impressed by these artists that do that kind of stuff. There is going to be supposedly a Warriors animated series, but honestly, I don't think it could be any better than what these fan-made videos are. And so we'll see what happens with the official version. But for now, anyway. I love all the OCs out there. So I've been getting lots of requests for warrior OCs, which are the middle row, some original characters that young readers and artists have made up. And sometimes they will send me a written description, and sometimes they'll send me artwork that they've drawn, and then I'll reinterpret it in my style. But these are some examples of some of my commissioned work that I've been doing lately. I guess we have about 10 minutes. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much do you usually charge for like a portrait of your scene portrait?
Well, I am setting up a page to take more commissions. It's $55 basically, is what I'm going to start charging on my new page. If you're interested, we can connect. I've got business cards. I can, you can email me or write me through Instagram or whatever it's. But anyway, we have, like I said, we have about 10 minutes. So I thought it would be fun, maybe to do some drawing. And does anyone out there have an OC that they've created?
And you.
Yeah? Do you have an OC?
So I made this one actually based here. I know. The golden outdated the block list grace. That's good.
Well, I thought it would be fun if you could describe your OC to me, and then I would try to draw it.
Okay, so she was morning star, not like morning stuff. So she has like the walking one ears with fur on it, so one big chest, and she's sort of like skinny a little bit.
Okay, so long.
She's cream color, like you could like under about 80.
Okay.
The like little heart one. That
Oh, nice, nice. I love the markings that a lot of these OCs have. Apparently the one that had the green cat with the clover on his chest, I got commissioned to draw this and I thought it was really cute or whatever. And then I found out there's been this whole online debate about whether warrior cats can have green fur and markings on their chests. And I'm like, okay, this is just for fun, so you can make your OC however you want. So I love that your cat has a heart on their chest, right? So, so whenever I'm drawing a character, if I'm doing a full body shot, I usually start off with, sketching out kind of the body first and sort of do the details of the head last. But if I'm doing a portrait, this is sort of how I start off with a rough character. Like sort of a generic cat head that could turn into anyone, right? So it start off rough. And that's sort of the examples I showed you earlier of a rough digital sketch. And then from there, you can add the details that turn your character into a warrior cat, or the character that it's supposed to be. In this case, this is Gray Stripe. As you can see, he's got the furry tuft of hair, the bushy cheeks, the expressive eyebrows. I could take this drawing and continue inking it. We have all these different tools here, so I could.
Let's see, I'll make short layers.
So I could, if I was going to finish this drawing, I would ink it like this, right? And really make those lines clean and smooth. But for right now, we have a rough sketch of Gray Stripe. Now, if I'm going to try to draw your OC, see, back to a pencil. So you said they were skinny. Is your cat a she cat or a he cat?
Cat, okay.
Morning Star?
Yes. Betraying.
So she's got pointy ears. So I made the pointy ears. I'm going to remember there's lots of tufts of fur in those ears.
the founder.
Like a little curl or a spike?
Look.
Okay, a little curl. So, again, most cats don't really have curls on their head, but in Warrior Cat's world, you can use those things to help make your character unique. Right, so a little tuft of fur.
He sort of has like big eyes that are like shows wondering.
So she's imagining something or thinking about something. So eyes are really important. I think I mentioned this earlier. I would try to give each character distinctively shaped eyes. So I would use, heavy lines around some characters' eyes, or heavy lines underneath their eyes for Gray Stripe, or, different shapes. Some would have almond shaped eyes, some would have big round shaped eyes. So that's something. What about, does she have a long snout or a short snout?
Like me, one stuff.
Yeah, okay.
So remember, when you're sketching, again, you can start off really rough and loose, and then, use your shapes, your simple shapes to guide where the things go on a face, right? So use one big circle for the head, and in the case of the warrior cats, I'd use a smaller circle for the snout. And then maybe a little smile as she's thinking about something important. Does she have any markings on her face?
He has some muzzles white, and the rest of it's
Cream color?
a point right gap and out.
A point where?
Just right here where the light.
Oh, I see. So going up on her forehead? Oh yeah, that's cool. All right, so, and she has a little heart on her chest.
Right, so.
And so we have our rough sketch. So I'm going to show you something else cool that a lot of artists do, especially if you're working digitally. Artists used to do this with a light box on paper. They would turn it around backwards and look at it from the back side and see if the drawing worked. Now that a lot of artists work digitally, you can oftentimes flip your artwork to look for anything that looks, sometimes a drawing will look normal one direction, but then when you flip it, you're like, oh, I made this side of the face lopsided, right? She needs to have a little higher cheek. And maybe I realized this eye is too close to the head, so I kind of refine a little bit. So once I started working, doing the sketch stage digitally, flipping the drawing and giving it a quick one over became a good habit to get into. Does your cat have a pointy chin or a round chin or a square chin?
It's just like, it's sort of round.
Sort of round, okay. So maybe I'll fix that chin, make those more round. All right, so we have our drawing. I'm gonna flip it back again. All right, so now I'm going to lower the opacity. So again, if I was going to draw this on paper, I would print it out at this stage in blue ink and then ink on top of it with a pen. Since I'm drawing digitally, I just turn down the opacity, which is a common tool that most art programs have. You can make things lighter or darker. So I turn down the opacity, make a new layer, and now I'm going to use an ink pen effect to start refining these lines. All right, sometimes I will draw the inside of a face. Once I have the sketch done, I usually like to draw the inside of the face first. So like the eyes, the nose. All right, does anyone have any other questions while I'm finishing this up? Just want to watch. The cool thing about Procreate too is it records your drawing as you're doing it. So you can always play it back. I don't think Photoshop does that. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
That's okay.
What was the most unique OC submission you tried to say to the artist?
Oh, I did one recently. I think its name was Hurricane Gale. And this cat had everything going on. Well, first of all, it had no irises, so its eyes were like weird, kind of like a ghost. And then it had a moon on its forehead, and half of its face was striped, and half of its face was normal. And it had like, a tuft of hair, and bushy cheeks, and then it had lilacs in its fur, like flowers and leaves. And so it was like, I appreciate all the thought that went into this character, but it might have been a little too much. Sometimes with a character design, you can go overboard with too many elements that make your character unique. But it was a lot of fun to draw that character for sure. I think it's on my Instagram if you're interested in seeing it. Any other questions?
So what's your favorite book you illustrated?
It's hard to say. I always say, as I was drawing each book, I would try to really invest myself in the character and the story. So, usually as I was drawing a book, I would say that book was my favorite as I was working on it. But looking back, I was thinking about it this morning, I would say Ravenpaw's Path was my favorite because I felt, when I first did Gray Stripe's Journey, or Gray Stripe's Adventure, it was my first project, and, I was nervous about making sure everything looked right, and maybe overthought it too much. And with Ravenpaw's Path, I was more comfortable in my work. I enjoyed the process more, and I really just enjoyed that story. I think it's a really great story arc about a character that a lot of people like. So looking back, I would say Ravenpaw's Path. But that might change if you ask me next week.
Did you always want to be an artist from the time you were young?
Yes, definitely. Yep, I would draw. My dad would bring home stacks of paper from work with like work stuff on one side, and then I would draw. I would just draw on that all the time.
You're just talking about that today. The much fake for you.
Yeah, you have a question?
Do you have any shop where you live that you base on the warrior cats or dog?
That's a good question. Yeah, Mudclaw So I had a cat named Milo when I lived in Brooklyn. I had a cat named Milo that I had for about 15 years till he passed away. And I specifically designed Mudclaw to look like my cat Milo. So if you're interested in seeing what my cat looked like, Mudclaw looks a lot like my cat Milo. And even though Mudclaw, some people might say that Mudclaw is a villain, I think he's misunderstood. His heart was in the right place. My cat Milo, he would scratch me sometimes, and he'd wake me up every night at 3 a.m. And, you know, he's kind of annoying, but I loved him. And so maybe that's why I based Mudclaw on my cat Milo. So that's another reason why sometimes I would say Winds of Change is my favorite, because it had a lot of personal, elements in it. Anyone else?
Fishing.
Yep.
So this is a debate in our households, but did your parents keep any darts? Any?
Some of it, yeah. Yeah, I found a lot recently. I mean, now it's like all in a storage shed somewhere. And it was funny, recently I found a bunch of old artwork, and some of it made me cringe and some of it made me smile. So I took everything, I took photos of everything that they had saved. I mean, they didn't save everything, but, a good amount. Yeah, exactly. I digitized it all, and then I had a big bonfire and burned 200 of it and kept some too. Yep. And you had a question back there?
Yeah, when you're looking for inspiration for, the variation spinning, where do you look for that?
Real life. I mean, cats are so, even though in some ways cats' faces aren't that expressive, so I had to make them a lot, I had to cartoonify them a lot, I think, to get the emotion across. As far as their body shapes and fur types and markings, there's so much diversity. So I would look at a lot of different cats I'd see online, and then for a while I subscribed to Cat Fancy magazine and used that as inspiration. And yeah. I don't know if I'm going to have time to color this one, but I can color it later and send it to you if you're interested. So this was Morning Star. Any other elements that I missed on her for now, except the color?
She has a place right with her eyebrow.
Oh, like the little ones, the little knots.
She also has sort of like she has like a flower
Oh, cool, cute.
with like lines.
Oh, nice. That's a good idea. So a little flower necklace made of skin sheep. We'll figure out what kind of flower later. What kind of flower do you know?
I
Maybe some kind of little wildflower. Right? Oh, it kind of looks like a locket now. All right. So I guess before we wrap up, does anyone else have any other questions? No? Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.